Hello, and welcome to my channel. In this session, we are going to learn how to load records or data into a data grid view from MySQL database using the VB.NET programming language. Okay, yes, so at the end of the session, you should be able to use a data grid view control and also learn how to load data from MySQL database into a data grid view. And it means that we need to meet some requirements before we get through this tutorial successfully. Yes, so we need some sort of local server running so that we can be able to implement our database functionalities. So if you have XAMPP, MAMP, WAMP, or any other form of database that is running locally on your machine, that is fine, okay? Yes, so we also need a Visual Studio IDE to be able to write our codes and do our form designing. Alright, so if you are using the version 2013 through to 2019 or higher, that is okay. Alright, so for this tutorial I'm using 2019. Alright, okay, so let's just get started to look at what we are supposed to do exactly. Okay, alright, so I have already launched my Visual Studio IDE, so I'm just going to hit on create new project here. And before I do that, I'm using the version 2019, so my interface is a bit different. Okay, so I'll just hit create new project here. Okay, then from the search box at the top there, I'll just search for Visual Basic. Alright, and I'll hit enter. Oh no, let me go back once more. Yes, so I'll make sure that I look for Windows Forms. Okay, I don't want a console, I want Windows Forms. Okay, that's what I'm interested in. I'll select that and then just hit on next. Then sorry about that, let me just rename this thing to Data Grid View. Data Grid View. Okay, and the name of the project is assigned to the solution name. Okay, also let's leave the location, I mean the project location, to the default location, and also the framework version. Let me just make sure the highest here is selected. All right, and I'll just hit on create. Okay, so it is now creating the project. All right, so our project is created successfully, and you can see we have a default form that is presented to us. We are going to make use of this form, so let's adjust it a little to suit our preference. So I'm just going to go to the properties of this form, and I'll make sure that the start position of this form is set to the center of the screen. And also let me change the form border style to nothing, none. All right, and then the font size of this form to be maybe 15. Okay, now what that will do is that it means that this form by default will have a font size of 15. So any control, be it a button, a label, a text box, whenever I place those controls on this form, it will assume the font size 15. Okay, that is the implication. Okay, so let me resize this thing to what I prefer, like that. So I think this is okay by me. Also, let me just place some few controls here. So I'll need a label. So inside my toolbox, I'll just search for a label and drag it onto the form. So you can see this label is assuming the font size 15 already. Okay, I also need a button. Okay, all right, I'll work on that later. Let me just delete this one. I also need a text box. Okay, so let me just drag and drop this, and then also we need a data grid view as well. So data grid view. Okay, yeah, so this, I would love that I position it at the bottom side here like that. Okay, all right, so let me send this thing to the top a little, and then we adjust this data grid view like that. Now I'll need a panel to implement some few stuffs. So a panel, so search for panel in the toolbox, this one right there. I'll just drag and drop it, and then I'll resize this thing to, so let me say that I want to dock this one at the top. So dock property here, and I'll select the top, so it is docked to the top of this form. And I'll change the back color of this to something bluish. Let me just search through this and see. Okay, dark turquoise. Okay, this is okay. This is okay for me. And then let me just copy this label once and then paste it again and drag it onto this panel. And I'll increase the font size of this particular label to perhaps 40 to maybe 35 will be okay. Okay, so I'm okay with this. Now let me change the text property of this one to DataGridView. Okay, DataGridView. Because I think that black is good for this text. Or let me see white. What white will offer us. It's not really standing out. So let me just change the back color of this panel to something that will let the white really stand out. Let me see this. Okay, this is okay. This is okay. Alright, so let me rearrange this controls button. So enlarge this button a little, and then this text box as well. And then okay, let me shrink this one a bit to the down part, and then let me say that this one right here I'll copy and then paste it once more. So this is not working. Let me just go and then bring one text box. No, it's not a rich text box. I don't want a rich text box. I want text box as in text box, this one right here. And let me resize this to my preference. Okay, so let me rearrange this once and then say that this one right here, maybe it can be username, and then copy, then paste, and this one right here can be perhaps password. Okay, then I can just have this one aligned here like that, and then let me change the back color of this one to still blue like I have for the panel. So let me select this button and then punch in still blue. Okay, and then the font color definitely for this particular button will be white. Okay, let me just say that add. All right. Okay. All right. So let me just also rename this grid view to maybe users grid. Okay. Okay. Let me bring this thing a bit down like that. And then okay. So I think I'm okay with this. Now let's debug this one to see what we've done so far. So I'll just hit on start and then wait for it to load successfully. Okay, so this is what we've been able to do so far, right? Okay. Now let me just stop debugging and then let me use one of these labels to do that. Copy, and then I'll just paste. Let me send this one right here and then change the text property to letter X. Okay, and I'll change the font color for this one to be maybe white. Okay, this is okay. Then maybe the font boldness should be bold. this one right here, and then the cursor property for this one should be hand, because I want to use this one to implement the close functionality. So I'll just rename this thing to LBL exit. Okay, then I'll just double click on this one right here, the label, and I'll say that application dot exit. I'll just bring parentheses because this exit is a method. So what I'm practically telling this one here is that whenever this label is clicked, okay, just close the entire application. Okay, all right, so that's basically what is happening. All right, now this button here, so let me just rename it to btn add, and then this one will be txt username, and then this one too will be txt password. Okay, and this one we named it users grid, right? Okay, now that we are through with our form designing, let's see how to implement the functionality to be able to add whatever we are going to input here into a database. So first of all, we need to add a reference of MySQL database to our project. By default, it is not included, so we need some mechanism to be able to implement that so that we can write MySQL queries or syntaxes. So I'll just go to my solution explorer, right click on this project name, and then I'll go to add, and I'll go to reference. Okay, then you can see from the reference manager here, I am having this one seated right here. Okay, it is because I've already worked with this, and that's why you are seeing it here. So if in case you don't have it, you need to get it downloaded onto your machine, either onto the desktop or anywhere you want on your machine, and then import it. So you just have to hit on browse and then locate wherever it is. So mine is seated in this directory here. Okay, this directory here. So I'll just have to select this one, that's what we want, and I'll just hit on add, and then I'll just hit on OK here. And as you can see from the references options here, references thing that is associated with the project, you can see that mysql.data has been included. It means that henceforth we can write MySQL queries or syntaxes. Okay, all right, now that we've been able to do that, we have to establish a connection string from our application to the database that we will be working with. Okay, so it means that we have to get our database running yet. So I'll just go to my browser, and then I'll punch in localhost, and then I'll say php my admin. Now I am using XAMPP. Okay, I'm using XAMPP, so this is how to get to the back end of the XAMPP, and also it is already running, and that's why you can see that when I came into the browser, I just punch in localhost and then php my admin, and it has taken me to the back end of MySQL. Okay, and if you're finding it difficult to implement or do this particular thing I just did, go watch my other tutorials, and I touched on how to get your XAMPP installed and how to even get it started and launch it to be able to get here. Okay, alright, so you can go and watch my previous tutorials or videos. You will get your head around it like that. Okay, alright, so let's just create a simple database called, maybe I'll go to the SQL tab here, and I'll say that maybe create database grid db. Okay, so that will be the name of our database. Let me zoom it so that you can see it a little. All right, grid db. So I'll just go downstairs, and then I'll hit on go. So the database has been created. So you can see from the list of databases that we have in our system, this one right here has been included. So when you expand this, it is empty at the moment because we have no entities or tables inside of it. So we are just going to say that create table, course we want to create a table inside that database. So create table, maybe users underscore tb, right? And I'll bring parentheses, then I'll terminate this. Now inside the parentheses, I'll just hit enter to expand so that I can create some few, or define some few attributes. So first of all, I need an ID which will be of the type integer, not now, and I want this to be the primary key, and then auto increment as well. All right, then I'll need a username which will be of the type varchar, and then length I want it to be 50, not now as well. And then I'll need a password, so user password varchar. I want this one to be like 100, and then not now. Okay, so these are the few attributes that we want it to be associated with this users table here. I'll just have to go downstairs and then hit on go to create this table. Oh no, we had a problem, so we need to say that on top. Let's just say use grade db. Okay, so it is trying to tell us that no database is selected to be able to create this table into. So I'll just say use grade db, use that database called grade db, and I'll just go back and then hit on wow. So let me see. Oh, okay, I did a typo in the spelling. So grade db, so double d. I'll just hit on go once again. Yes, and then we've had a successful query. Alright, now let me just reload this thing and then expand this to see whether we have our users table. So as you can see, it is right there. When you expand the users table, you can see the columns that are in there. We have the ID, we have the user's password, attributes, and also the username as well. Now let's go back to our application. Now let me first of all select this table so that you see that there isn't anything that is currently inside this table. So when I just selected a table, it performed the select query. Select all from the users table, and you can see nothing was returned practically, right? Let's go back to application and then implement the functionality to be able to add to that particular table. Okay, so I'll just hit on add, this add button here. Alright, then I'll first of all go on top of this class and I'll say that import mysql.data.mysql client. Alright, and that way we say that include MySQL to be part of this particular form here. Alright, so that we can write MySQL queries or syntaxes in this particular form. Okay, let me come back to my click event for this button add control. Alright, so I would have to establish the connection string. Okay, so let me just say that dim constring, meaning connection string, right? Okay, equal to, I'll open double quotes and I'll say that server equals localhost. I'll terminate that and I'll say that database equals to grid db. I'll terminate it and I'll say that user equals the root user, and then password equals, I'll just leave it like that. Now what I practically did was that I'm saying that this is a connection string to the database that we are currently working with. So the server, the name of this server is a localhost. The database that we want to work with is the grid database, and then the user of this particular database is the root user, and then the password on that particular database is just empty. So I brought equal to, and then I didn't proceed with anything. I just leave it blank like that. Alright, meaning that the password is not available or empty. Alright, so let me just go and then say that MySQL dim con, okay, equals to new MySQL connection. Okay, then I'll just pass in this connection string like that. Okay, and this will practically say that okay, this is an instance of MySQL connection with this connection string. So having done that, I'll just say that try, and I'll hit enter. I'll say that con.open. I'm trying to open the connection. Now that I've established a connection string, I'm trying to open it, and then I'll say that using con, I'll hit enter. Using this particular connection, I'll say dim query as string, dim query as string, now equal to, I'll say that insert into users underscore tb. I want the username, comma, and then the upass. Alright, then I'll say values. Okay, now I'll say at. I'm going to use parameterized queries. Okay, so you name, and then at upass. Then I'll just go outside this one and hit enter. Then I would have to say that dim cmd, or let me say yes, so dim cmd as new MySQL command. Okay, let me just get rid of this. This cmd should be equal to new MySQL command, like that, open parentheses. Then I'll pass in this query. It takes two arguments, the query and then the connection. Okay, now since I'm using parameterized queries, this is not the actual values that we want to push into the database or the table, so we need to actually now tell MySQL that these are the actual values that we want. So I'll say that using cmd, okay, dot parameters, and I'll hit enter. So I'll say dot add, what is up, some sort of error here. So using cmd dot parameters, oh, okay, so I'm using the using statement here. Okay, so here I'm just going to say that with cmd dot parameters. Okay, I'll hit enter, and I'll say that dot add with value. So I now call the parameterized placeholders, or I mean the placeholders here. Say that you name, and then I'll tell it the actual thing that it should send into the table. So I'll say txt username dot text dot stream, and then I'll hit enter, and I'll cater for the password as well. So that add with value, then at upass, I'll go outside this and I'll say txt user password, txt password dot text dot stream. Okay, now having done this, let me go outside the wait statement and then say that dim I, let me say dim result as integer. Okay, I'll hit enter. I'll say that result now equal to cmd dot execute non query. Okay, so now I'm saying that this command here is holding some parameterized queries, or let me say some placeholders, and I've been able to tell MySQL that these are the actual things that I want you to send into the table. And this parameterized queries, the essence of it is that we are trying to prevent SQL injection up to some level. Okay, all right, so when a third person that is trying to get his way around your system through the wrong means. Whenever the person tries to, I mean, punch in actual queries instead of the username and then the actual password, this particular parameterized queries in a way will try to prevent that happening. Okay, so in my other videos I try explaining this thing a bit in depth. Okay, so you can watch the other videos and then you get to understand what we mean by parameterized queries and all those things. All right, so I'm not trying to tell you that go and then fetch this command. There are some parameters over there, add the actual values to these parameters, and now we can push it inside the database. So that is practically what is happening. Now this execute non query is a member of this particular command instance. Okay, so what it will do is that it will pick this command here and then it will execute a non-query. Okay, now it's either returning a true or false value, or let me say a 1 or 0 value. So we can store that in an integer variable and then check whatever is being returned with this result variable here. So I'll just say next that if result, okay, if result is greater than 0, it means that actually something went into the database, right? So I just say msg box record added, and this outside that I'll say vb information. So else I'll say that msg box sorry could not add record, and then I'll say vb critical. All right, and then from here I can say that con.close. Okay, and then with the exception parts, let me just go and say that msg box ex.message.toString, so that if there is any form of exception we can get to know what it is exactly. Okay, then let me just say con.close again here. Okay, now let's run this program and see what we've done so far. So I'll just hit on start. Okay, so let me punch in my username as perhaps Ernest. So let this be in small letters, and the password as well, Ernest, and I'll hit on add. Good, so we've had a positive result, record added. Let me hit on OK and see what happens. Now let me go back to the database and then particularly our table, and then just select this table once again inside the grid database and then select that table. As you can see that this two records has been returned, right? It means that whatever we inserted is now working exactly. Okay, now let's learn how to fetch this thing back to the front end and then append it to our data grid view. So I'll just close this and then let me just go back and then select this form. Okay, I'm selecting this form and I'll just double click on it like that. Now let me go outside this load event. So what we did was that we assigned the load event to the form. When you select the form itself and then you double click on it, it assigns the load events to it. So let me go outside the sub and sub, and I'll define a public sub saying that load users. Okay, then I'll just hit enter like that. Now let me go back and then fetch this connection string, or to be on the safer side, let me just cut it from here and then place it at the top, I mean just after the public class here like that, so that it will be global and therefore I can access it practically anywhere in this particular class. So I'll say that try, okay, and I'll hit enter. I'll say that dim con equals to new MySQL connection, and I'll pass in the connection string like that, and I'll say that, let me send this thing outside the try statement like that, and I'll say that con dot open, okay, and I'll say using this particular connection, I'll hit enter. Using this dim query as string equal to select all from the users table, okay, then I'll say that dim data adapter as equal to new dim data adapter equal to new MySQL data adapter, this one right here. Now this one also take two arguments, first the query and then the connection, okay. Now we are using data adapter because we want to fetch all the records that are inside of our table called users. We want to adapt it, so that with the adapter what we can do is that we can further use what we call a data table. Then whatever that is held in this data adapter, we push it into a data table so that our record will now be represented in a structure like rows and columns, and so therefore we can append it to this data grid view, because that is how the data grid view represents data, rows and columns nature, okay. So I'll say that I also need a data table, this one right here. I'll say table equal to new data table, okay. So this is giving an error because I'm trying to call the class itself, so let me say dim table like that, and I'll say that now this data adapter here that we defined has what we call a fill method. Data adapter, this one right here, has what we call the fill method. What we want to fill, the record that is being held in the data adapter, we want to fill it into our table like that. Are we okay? Okay. Now having done this, I'll just say that let me just perform some simple check if there are some records in the table, okay. So I'll say if, go outside and hit enter like that. I'll come back to this and say if table dot rows dot count, okay, is greater than 0, means that there are some records or some record inside of the table, okay. So this is how to check if there is a row contained inside the table, okay. I'll say that if that is the case, I'll say that users grade dot data source here equal to the table that we just defined. So what is practically happening is that we use this adapter to fetch whatever record we have inside this table. Now we created an instance of this data table so that we can fetch whatever that is being held in this data table and fill it inside the table, so that our record now be represented in a form of rows and columns, because that is how tables represent data. And now we come down and then say that if in case there is a row count and then we find some records in the table, then it means that okay, we can go ahead and say that fetch this our data grid view, and then the data source for this grid view should be the table that we are currently having here, okay. All right, okay, so I think that we can just end it here like that, and then let's go to the section part. As usual, let's just get to know whatever exception may be thrown, so we can work with it as and when. So dot to string, like that. So one more parenthesis. Okay, so this is practically what we've done, right? Now this is a sub method I've created. I did this because I would want to be calling this sub method over and over again. So on form load, so let me go back to the form, and I'll just double click on this form, and then it has brought me to the form load event. So here I'll just say load users, or load, like that. Okay, so this sub here is the one right here. All right, and then let's run this application to see what we've done so far. Okay, exactly. So as you can see, we haven't the records that are seated inside the table right here. So that's basically how to go about it. Now I would want to implement one more thing, that immediately we punch in username and password and hit on add, it should reflect here. So let me go back and then say that. Let me double click on this add button again, and then just after we print the successful message, I mean record added message here. Okay, you know, let me come back to, yes, let me just do it and just say load users or load user. Okay, this is a method like that. Okay, now let's run the application once more. And then let me just punch in coffee, and then just want to maybe coffee 1 2 3. So I'm expecting that whenever I hit on add, it should print a message saying that record added, and then after that it should just display the next record here. So let me just hit on add, like that. As you can see, that is working perfectly, right? Good. So that is it about this DataGridView session. If you like this video, please give it a like, hit the like button, and also, yeah, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do that, because there are going to be more amazing stuffs, amazing content being uploaded on this channel. Do me a favor by just hitting that subscribe button. What it does is that it motivates me to keep giving you the best content. I hope you like this video. Until next time, peace, and then I wish you a happy learning. Bye.